This is Caribbean.
Sometimes I sit and wonder, do black people remember the message of dignity we got in 1970? Because that revolution changed the whole Caribbean. In every town and village, black people got the message. The message showed us the beauty of blackness. Yet some women still in them white stupidness, pressing up their hair, rouge and lipstick to waste, turning their eyebrows out of place. Oh yes, when you see these girls, you must smile, don't you fret. Their values are upset, they ain't get the message as yet. I am uncomfortable with our voice, my people. How long shall we continue to bathe in them white values? Some men are prepared to die, wearing English coat and tie. Tchaikovsky, some men prefer, rather than their Lord Kitchener. Some still like to work underneath a white cross. Some value their English knighthood and gold cross. Some feel proud when they marry a white lady. Some think Rastafarians nasty, nasty. If they dance playing soul music every set, don't fret, find a new fet. They ain't get the message as yet.
This is Caribbean.
We learned from the revolution, foreign things must come second. Yet some people still prefer hot dogs and hamburger or music festival. Imagine, it's still piano and violin. Teachers still teaching Shakespeare. Why not poems of Lord Superior? We learn to value our past and culture, whether it be Asian or from Africa. We learn that all blacks in this poor Caribbean share a common culture, where one culture makes us one. So when they ban short shirt from singing in refrain, CDC acting like a jamet, they ain't get the message as yet. Water and you see Guyana, innocently they suffer socialism. Some say no, some still hate Fidel Castro. To all these folks, brother man, let's stretch our helping hand, so that one day they will see the message of 1970. Or some guys still call one another ugly. Some bow to the Queen as if she might be. Some of our leaders in the Caribbean on black thinkers, they put a banner, they can't land. To them, Granger, Weeks, and Rodney is a threat. Their actions I regret. They get the message yet. In our poems of Lord Superior, we learn to value our past and culture, whether it be Asian or from Africa. We learn that all blacks in this poor Caribbean share a common culture, where one culture makes us one. So when they ban short shirt from singing in refrain, CDC acting like a jamet, they ain't get the message yet. They like, oh, Zumba. Water and you see Guyana. Innocently they suffer socialism. Some say no, some still hate Fidel Castro. To all these folks, brother man, let's stretch our helping hand, so that one day they will see the message of 1970. Or some guys still call one another ugly. Some bow to the Queen as if she might be. Some of our leaders in the Caribbean on black thinkers, they put a banner, they can't land. To them, Granger, Weeks, and Rodney is a threat. Their actions I regret. They get the message yet.
Show your daughter how much you love her with this beautiful gift. It says, to my daughter.
Get to Tobago, the land of my birth, which foreigners don't know. I passed through depression and starvation to be where I am in my profession. So Tobago, I am thankful to you. I will never be ungrateful. I say thanks, thanks, thanks. I thank my mother, my school teacher, my neighbor, my father, my brother, my sister. So you see, Tobago, I thank thee. Woo! Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum, dum. Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bam. Bam, bam, bee. I thank the mother of Tobago. Tobago being recognized anywhere you go. And I am sure you'll be more than glad to know that the mother of Tobago is Trinidad. I thank Trinidad for my education, making me Tobago most recognized woman. I say thanks. Woo. I thank Trinidad for my protection since 1970 revolution. So you see, Trinidad, I thank thee. Woo. Ba-dum-bum. Ba-da-ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum-bum. Oh yeah, 1978. I thank thee. Oh, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Oh, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. shut up.
Good evening to you and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, a little late start. I thank thee, the Calypso Rose, I thank thee. I thank thee. I borrow from Calypso Rose. I thank thee another year today. Some of you have already wished me happy birthday, happy or strong, as they say. Not a big fuss, but I thank thee. I thank Guyana, I thank the Caribbean, I thank Africa, I thank Buxton, all of the places which have given me sustenance. I thank all of you. We are together. I thank you. Another year, another birthday, another day of reflection, and another day to put your boots on and ready to start all over again and to do what we do. Before that, the mighty chalk dust, the message of 1970. The message of 1970, the year of the February Revolution in Trinidad and Tobago, the Black Power Revolution, where Black Power activists almost took over the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Sounding the bell of Black Power, Black nationalism. They tell me and they tell Tacuma Ogunseye and the rest of us that we are stuck in the 1970s. You know why? Because they're afraid of revolution. We are revolutionaries. We are sons and daughters of the revolution. And as Chalk Dust is saying there, sometimes we Black people forget the message of 1970. The message of 1970 was that Black man, Black woman, you have power and use it wisely. Revolution never died because it doesn't come every day. There's a reason revolution doesn't come every day. And those who say we are stuck in the 1970s, Chalk Dust answers them. They want us to forget the message of 1970. The messages say this color means something. And when we say we love this color, we're not offending anyone. We love you all. The message of 1970 by Dr. Hollis Liverpool, Calypso Rose herself, reference 1970. We of course are sons and daughters of revolution. We need a revolution now. We need a Black revolution. We need a Guyanese revolution. We need a working class revolution. We need a Caribbean revolution. Good evening to you all. Thank you all very much for the birthday wishes. You know, the birthday was never a big deal. When you're born so close to Christmas, you're in trouble because when you grow up poor, as we all did, they can't manage 2 gifts. You gotta wait for the Christmas present, the tie gun and the nice cake and the nice food. You know, when was the birthday? I think they would buy 2 eggs, 2 boiled egg, and so on, and you gotta wait. But I'm thankful. To have lived another year, and I'm ready to face the year to come. Brother Tacuma is here with us. Brother Tacuma, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Hines, and good evening to your viewers. And let me join with all of those comrades, friends, and relatives who have been saluting your birthday. I want to join with them and to salute you and hope that you see many, many more birthdays because we have a lot of unfinished work to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my brother. And Tacuma, I want to take you back to 1970 because I would imagine as you listen to Chalk Dust, and we all grew up with Chalk Dust music, Chalk Dust himself a soldier of the Black struggle and the Black revolution. But as you listen there to Chalk Dust and it reminds us of 1970, you were alive in 1970 and you were part of the Caribbean Black Power movement in 1970. Your reflections of the 1970 revolution?
I think it was one of the most, in modern Caribbean history, is one of the most brightest spots in the struggle for Caribbean people, and particularly the African Caribbean people, for liberation and self-determination. And I think that it played a major role in revolutionizing many sections of many parts of the Caribbean, which we are still feeling the effects of that period. I think that it creates a whole generation of Caribbean persons, both academic, non-academics, working people, patriots, who saw in the 1970s revolution a glimpse of what a future new Caribbean and a liberated Caribbean could be. And I think that the aspirations of that period is still rooted in the consciousness of our people, even though it may not be manifesting itself in a very aggressive way. I think it is deep in the consciousness of the people, and the correct spark will regenerate and ignite the spirit of liberation of our people. And I think that is what all the oppressors in the region, and particularly in Guyana, is afraid of. Because it don't take much. It don't take much because these things are rooted in our historic memory.
Thank you very much, my brother. And in that calypso, Chuck does reference two people who you know very, very well, Eusi Kwayana and Walter Rodney. When I heard that calypso, I was a small boy, and Ken Cosby had a show on GBS at that time, Night Ride. He would play these calypsos and so on. And I remember hearing calypso, hearing Kwayana name. And I jump as a small boy because, of course, Kwayana is your villager, and you expect people who are named in songs to be people of world repute, and you know that Kwayana was, but you hear his name in song, and I remember that thing sent me crazy because I'm hearing my countryman, my leader in song, and he also referenced Rodney and others in that song. Reflect on the contributions, and you don't have to give us a thesis. I think you are better placed because you, of many people who are alive today, were very, very close to Kwayana and Rodney. Reflect on their contributions to the Caribbean Revolution and to where we are today as a people.
I think it is no doubt that Brother Eusi Kwayana played an important role in crystallizing very important tenets of the Caribbean Revolution. And I think that he stood out as a person who recognized the historic injustices to the African people and the need for a new African beginning directed not under foreign domination, but under our self-emancipation. And I think that his activities, even though a lot of it was rooted in Guyana, he went out of his way to promote contact with the rest of the wider Caribbean and the other comrades of like minds in the Caribbean. And his articulation of the struggle led to a clarity in the Guyana and in the Caribbean among African Caribbean people in a way at the time, which I think was very necessary. And he stood up as an example, as an uncorruptible and not a typical opportunistic politician, but as a genuine human being trying to understand the historical challenges of his people, both the African people and the Caribbean people, and to help to foment, a movement in the region that could help to materialize those expectations. Walter was extremely outstanding in many particular ways as it relates to the Caribbean, because his exclusion from Jamaica led to the fomenting of street protests in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, and his activism among the most oppressive sections of the Jamaican society, and by extension also other areas of the Caribbean, and his intellectual work on the history of Africa cement him in a very special way as a revolutionary academic and a revolutionary fighter. Walter came over very clearly in a way that the populace understood him, not simply as an academic, but they saw in him a genuine leader trying to advance the interests of ordinary people. So I think both Koyana and Rodney, in their own ways, have made an extremely important statement in the evolution of Caribbean history that will stand the tide of time. And both of them have produced disciples who are continuing, the legacy in more than one ways.
Brother Tacuma Ogunseye himself, a veteran now, reflecting on two of the persons who have had a tremendous impact on his own evolution as an activist, and I'm sure as a person, because people like Kwayana and so on, they did not just impact you politically, they help you in personal ways. I think both Ogun and I would say that our lives are where they are today because we cross paths with people like Kwayana and Rodney. And we continue to do the work that they started. Kwayana, of course, is still alive and living out his own work and seeing in many ways, sometimes they're ups and downs, but we can all say that we are at a better place as a people, as a Caribbean people, a Guyanese people, and African people than we were before the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s and the 1970s. Brother Tacuma, let us talk a little bit about some of the issues that have been animating conversations in the Caribbean in recent times. Chief among them is the issue of the cash transfers. There's a way in which history moves in, as they say, strange ways, but it keeps on moving. You and I were part of the collective that gave the space for Dr. Clive Thomas, another unsung hero, another larger-than-life contributor to Guyanese and Caribbean liberation, still with us and sits with us in our executive. And in 1918, when he was invited to Buxton, and he came there and announced cash transfers from oil which was not yet pumped. And it created perhaps the biggest stir in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years in Guyanese politics. It brought out views and assumptions from many quarters, most of them that this is craziness, this is madness, this will not work, this will not work. Today, 7 years later, the entire Guyana are up in arms, calling on a government that said this thing couldn't work, but promised it to the people at election, and now are saying that they're not giving it to people. And the Guyanese people have made this a big political issue. The APNU took to the streets last week and to say we stand in solidarity with the people for these cash grants. And we want to say that one of the reasons we have this difficulty now is that you are not doing it the right way. You are seeking to turn cash grants into handouts, and that's not what we are talking about. As you watch it, the last few weeks unfolded, if someone had told you just a few weeks ago, a few months ago at the election, that cash grants would have been the first thing to bring Guyanese onto the streets after the election, would you have believed them?
Well, because I have been paying close attention to the response of the Guyanese community across race and across politics to Dr. Thomas's and the WPA's cash transfer proposal that we made 7 years ago. And I continue to argue, both in the executive and outside the executive, that it is a policy that have long won the hearts and the support of the entire country. I pay careful attention to these things. So if somebody had suggested to me that after the elections, when the PPP commit to pay the cash grant and then they refuse, I would not be surprised at the response of Guyanese people. And I think people are correct in their response. You see, the PPP was engaged in political opportunism. They wanted to use the cash grant handout as a way to consolidate their electoral support and hope that people, and particularly African Guyanese and probably Amerindians, will rush to the polls and vote for them. But as the election results show, they got no significant votes from neither the African community or the Amerindian community. And in PPP style, it is payback time. You know, we will spite you. It's payback time. And you don't vote for we, then, you know, since the PPP treats the national purse as their private bank account, they believe that the money belongs to them and they will dole it out as they feel pleased. But I am very glad that the majority of Guyanese across race and across politics have been indicting the PPP in a very profound way for the backtracking on this important electoral commitment. We have to hail up the APMU to take, because to go to the streets and to represent this issue, which is an issue that touches in a real way the very soul of the multiracial poor in this country. And I think that they have to be commended. But it also demonstrates a reality of Guyanese politics. I think the APMU read the mood of the people correctly. I think they were right to listen to the activists who were saying that the people really want the APMU to represent them and to fight for this thing. I think the judgment that the bulk of the Guyanese people support the demand for the cash transfer, I think those perceptions was accurate assessment of the state of the Guyanese population. But sadly to say, the response of the masses did not turn out to be what I'm sure the organizers had expected. And it brings to bear this question in Guyana that is not simply an issue of leadership not doing the right thing, but is also an issue of to what extent the population is willing to fight for what they believe they ought to get. And I think that the question of fear and the question of alienation stands very strong in the political consciousness of the people. And we have to note both things. We have to commend the APMU for biting the bullet and testing the waters, but we also have to objectively recognize the weaknesses that demonstrated by our people, the same people who want this money. Now, the cash transfer struggle from we, the WPA, while we support any payout from the state, from the oil revenue to the population, we support. But the WPA is adamant that our proposal for $1 million Guyana dollars annually in a structural way, legal way, passed through Parliament, and becomes a reality like old age pension, which is protected from the fantasies of politicians, that the population know that annually they will get this payout from the oil resources, and it is not subject to the fantasies of any political politician or political party. And as we fight for immediate payout, our eyes is on the bigger picture, because we believe for us the cash transfer that we are advocating is a very important initiative as far as we're concerned in the struggle to begin to wipe out poverty from the country. And we believe, okay, that the masses of people should not get detracted by the games that the PPP is playing with these theoretical commitment to cash transfer and treating the nation like if you are little children, if you behave yourself, you won't get something. I mean, it's very insulting. Because at the end of the day, the money is the masses of Guyanese people money. It belongs to the people. And the government is only there to administrate it in the best interest of the people. So we in the WPA are saying, yes, we have to keep the pressure up for the government to honor its commitment that it made in the elections, because we have to guard against a political culture where politicians come at election time, promise things, and after the elections, they walk away from the promise. That is a battle that is continuously, and it has to go on with oil money or without oil money. But it relates to the transfer of oil money. The WP is adamant, and we will not rest until we win this important structural device to deal with poverty in Guyana, that each and every Guyanese household receive minimally $1 million Guyana dollars annually.
Brother Tacuma, I want to take you back, because there's a lot in what you've said there, and I want to take you back with one of the earliest statements you made, and that is that the PPP promised this cash transfer. I prefer cash transfer rather than grant, because they're not granting us anything, as you say. They promise it with the hope of getting people to vote for them. That is, people outside of their natural constituency. And by natural, I don't mean here in a biological sense. I mean it in a political sense. And people from outside of their constituency then vote for them. And so now you are theorizing that what they're doing is spiting people by not giving that cash transfer. And in the process of spiting people, they are igniting a situation where people are tending to almost beg, to almost grovel. And here is the thesis of a very cynical party that is prepared to take an honorable proposal that is meant to get rid of what is now 58% poverty, and using it as a weapon to beat people who didn't vote for them, and to go sit back and create the conditions for people to grovel. Talk to that, expand on that thesis, because it is your thesis.
Yes, you see, the PPP is a very spiteful political party. And they dress up their spite in fancy language. They will find ways to target money to the Indian supporters. So they know that not paying the cash transfer at Christmas, and they assume, given the history and the culture of the country, the African community pays probably a more serious interest in Christmas, even though now the gap is narrowing between Africans and Indians as a result in terms of Christmas. But genuinely, they know that Africans have a lot of high expectations for Christmas, and it's a time of the year when the demand for money, is great, and they felt that it would be a good way to attract African voters to the PPP. And now that the elections have come and gone, and they fail to get the African voters, they have to demonstrate to the African voters, you got to pay a price. You didn't vote for us, and we ain't giving you any money. And you see, they do this because they recognize that in the body politic of the country, while people are very clear as to PPP's behavior and PPP oppression, the population is not prepared to put an end to the oppression by coming out in the streets in massive numbers and to stand up and to be counted. People find making a statement in the elections, and I think that the African Guyanese community went out in the elections and made a statement against the PPP. Even though it hurt the APMU, I think what the support for WIM was African Guyanese making a statement against the PPP and saying, look, we're not going to vote for you. We prefer to vote for another Indian candidate than to vote for you. And I think that that what we are up against here is an entrenched PPP culture, which will not change until the masses. And I don't expect the Guyanese masses to fight as a united bloc on anything in the very near future. But some section of the population has to break out of this fear and to speak to the PPP in a manner that the PPP ought to be spoken to. And I'm convinced that it has to be, given everything we know about the country. The Amerindians are too far away from the coast and the city. The Indian Guyanese are locked in the PPP's fear politics and all the various machinations of the PPP to keep them in place. It has to be an African rebellion. It has to be a return to the 70s for African people. And I am convinced that the PPP attitude is tied up on their conviction that the African community is not ready to return to the 70s. And it's our duty to help to force our people to return to the 70s because we badly need a return to the 70s in order to tame this reckless and wicked PPP leadership.
Brother Tacuma Ogunseye tonight, please share the link. We're on tonight. We're on tonight. I would like to thank those of you who continue to wish us happy birthday. Our birthday, my birthday today. And I want to thank you and thank the hundreds of you who have done so throughout the day on social media and the various fora where we express such things these days. You know, Brother Ogunseye, I want to stay on this, what the old-time Marxists would call contradiction in the politics. I have, many of us not predicting, many of us are led to believe that the Vice President, Jack Dio, is not well. The PPP has not made a formal statement, but they have not denied that the Vice President is not well. And I have come out on a limb because there is an aspect of our politics that they don't talk about. And by our politics, I mean progressive politics. I've come out on a limb and I've said, I don't care for Jack Dio politically. I don't care for his politics. He has led a movement that has destroyed politics in this country. He has been nasty to us politically and personally. But if he's ill, I feel my humanity, which comes out of my African culture, says that I must wish him well, that I must say at a personal level, I want you to get well. I want you to get well. And that has ignited a ton of bricks on the part of African Guyanese who are beating me up, correctly beating me up, and saying I ought not to wish him well. I ought not to wish him well because of what he has done to us, what he has done to African people, what he has done to the WPA, what he has done to me personally. And I point that out to say that some of our Indian comrades and supporters of the PPP label people like me and you racist. And here we are having to take licks from our people, for wishing the PPP well. If that does not say to the PPP, the depths to which they have driven half of this country, what will? Comment on that, because it speaks to the contradiction that you've been talking about there, that people feel very strongly, but they're not going out on the streets. And the fact that they're not going out on the streets, the PPP thinks that they love them. Talk.
Firstly, I want to stand in solidarity with you on the position you took. I listened when you stated on your program to wish the Vice President a speedy recovery. I know the political culture in the country, but as political leaders, we have a responsibility that is greater than the immediate the demands of the immediate politics. We have to look ahead. We have a nation to mold. And as you correctly said, our politics is driven by a cultural, profound cultural, philosophical worldview. Our politics are not driven like the Eurocentric politics. You see, a lot of the African people who will criticize you and who will say, because Jagdi was nasty to us and so forth, we must return the same. They have been schooled in Eurocentric politics. But we fortunately have been schooled in Afrocentric politics. And we bring to our political judgment an African worldview, which does not permit us to lose our humanity, even in the case of fighting vicious and bloody wars. Human beings fought wars. But at the end of the day, if they are good human beings, when a soldier drop his guns or he's shot and he's wounded and he can't be a threat to you, if you shoot him, you're a criminal. You're not a noble soldier acting in any proper way. And humanity have long accepted that. We have Africans have long worked out that regardless of what is the state of politics or human relationship among ourselves and other people, we have a duty to the future and to the future generations, and we have to set an example not only for ourselves, but for the future generation to come. And I think that you did the correct thing. Now, people in Guyana, and I don't think the PPP supporters and the PPP leadership will be appreciative of what you did. I think they will respond in a very cynical way, and they will try to even exploit the criticisms that you are receiving from sections of the African community and try to play it against you and to their advantage. I think we have to live with that reality. But at the end of the day, you have a responsibility for your own politics. And you have a responsibility to the WPA, to which we are both, along with Brother Rohit Kanai, leaders of the party. And I remember when Burnham died. Burnham jailed me. The PNC do all kinds of viciousness to win the WPA. And when Burnham died, Koyana was looking, he asked a few people to join him, to pass by the Burnham funeral, to march past and pay his traditions. And when he asked me, I refused. I said, no, brother, you see, Burnham killed Rodney. Burnham locked me up in jail. I can't do it. And Koyana said, Ogun, I am an African leader. And how it will be, look, Burnham is an African leader. What example I will be setting the generations of African to come. If after the man dead and he can't do harm nobody, I can't go and show my respect. It is years after, as I keep contemplating on the UC's position, I fully understood the profound nature of it. And something cracked into my memory. I'm not good at remembering these names, but people know that in Angola, I think it's Angola, yes, the MPLA and UNITA engaged in a bitter civil war.
Yes.
And when the UNITA leader was killed, the government gave him a national funeral.
Yes, Jonas Savimbi.
Yeah, give him a national funeral, demonstrating to the world the profound humanity of Africans. And I think that is a major statement, that many times people, underestimate. They criticize Africans to all kinds of things. But when we demonstrate noble things, many times it go unnoticed. But we're not doing these things as a publicity stunt. We do it out of profound conviction based upon our African worldview.
Yes. And that point is well taken. In my village there, Buxton, as you know, a place where WPA had quite, as we call it, strength. And it was probably one of the places that we could flex our muscles in a certain kind of way. And they were activists in the PNC and activists on our side. We were at each other's throat and so on. And today, we hang out together. And some of the old WPA and PNC activists from way back 50 years ago are amazed that people from both sides are friends today. One of my best friends today is perhaps one of the chief PNC person at the time. But like you said, we are driven by an understanding of humanity, that our politics are driven not just by expediency, but by humanity. And I think it's a lesson that we have to lead in teaching the rest of the world and the rest of Guyana. And so therefore, thank you for taking us back to that point when Guyana made that decision. I remember it to this day. I remember because I was of my immediate response was your response. Though I didn't tell Guyana. I didn't tell you, but I was in my mind. But when he laid it out and he talks about death being the water's edge and how that is African, and you're thinking, people in the villages don't talk. The Kosmati, and then somebody dead, and everybody, cooking a pot and carrying it for the setup and so on. And I say, Guyana is right. Guyana is right. Thank God for AUC Guyana. And so, sisters and brothers, we recognize where you stand, but we want to say, take that energy. Don't fight Jack Dio, the person who is sick, but fight Jack Dioism. Fight Jack Dioism. Fight the things that have been done in his name. That's where we want the energy to go. Jack Dio, a sick man today. He's politically sick in many ways. And it's the political sickness we want you all to stand up against, right? The political sickness, not a natural illness. Again, we repeat, Mr. Jack Dio, get well. And we can call you brother, even if you would not call us brother, because we know something that you may not know. Yes, today, Ashe is saying Jimmy Cliff was buried today. A national funeral in Jamaica. The way in which Jamaica responds, and we in the Caribbean ought to respond to our great icons. Jimmy Cliff himself, a soldier of the African Revolution, of the Caribbean Revolution, belongs to that generation of Walter Rodney and others who push the envelope and for African people to stand tall in our Caribbean. Brother Tacuma, the European Union observer team came to Guyana and they observed the elections. They gave a preliminary report and then they gave a more detailed report. Many of us who have read the report see nothing profoundly new in the report. Yet the government respond viciously to that report. Obviously, what the European Union did was to expand the meaning of what a free and fair election is. And when you think back that way back to the 1970s, we had been talking about what a free and fair election is. And now finally, the white people have caught on, and the government is hopping mad. Why?
Firstly, I want to say that to the extent that the European Union's report represents and advance to previous reports, we have in part to thank our opposition. They don't like to be called opposition.
Opposition nominated.
The nominated commissioners, Trotman, Alexander, and Corbyn, who over the years, and particularly at this last elections, went out of the way to make important recommendations to the European Union and to, pull them over the coals on the fact that they have been observing elections after elections. They have been making tremendous recommendations which the government have totally ignored, and yet still they keep coming to these elections, and the commissioners ask what really is the value of doing it. And I want to believe that that criticism bore some fruit. As you correctly stated, of course, the European Union in their defense always say that they could observe, they could make recommendations to the government, but they had no way of forcing the government to implement any of the recommendations. But I think the fact that in this last elections and in this last report, they have decided to raise the issue of what constitutes really fair and free elections. And in so doing, they also subtly raising the question of what constitutes democracy and good governance. And I think that the PPP, who has become accustomed to a very tame EU report, recognize the shift in this report, and they see it as a great exposure of the PPP machinations in these elections. In all previous reports I can remember, the PPP generally is very high praise for the European Union. But this time, they find themselves being forced to criticize the European Union because they bring into question this whole question of whether in Guyana you really have free and fair elections, and whether in Guyana you really have, democracy at play. And I think that the PPP's response is predictable. It's predictable because they have become so accustomed of not being criticized by these white people, and they take it for granted that the support that they enjoy from the European Union and similar organizations, they will always be able to enjoy it. And they forget that these organizations have their own reputation to protect. And there's times where the domestic politics of a country that they have to observe, and particularly we speak about elections, force them to step back And to say and call a spade, I think they're quite correct in highlighting the way in which the incumbent was able to manipulate and use state resources to give them, a unfair advantage. I think they were quite right in the observation that the state media, over probably 90% of the coverage on the elections went to the PPP. And that in itself doesn't hold good for fair elections and free elections. So I think it is a plus, and the PPP response is predictable, and I hope that we in the opposition could find some meaningful way of exploiting this little contradiction that has opened up between the PPP and the European Union on the elections.
But Tacuma Ogunseye, you mentioned the opposition there, and what we used to call the opposition today is not necessarily the same. If you look at the National Assembly, on the opposition side, you have 4 parties. You have the Win Party, you have the Forward Guyana Party of Sister Manza, you have the APNU, which is made up of this delegation represent 2 parties, the PNC and the WP. So effectively, we have 4 parties in the opposition. Now, there has been a lot of calls from people on the ground, from political observers, for the opposition to work together. We know the WPA and the PNC are working together in the APNU, but there's been call for the APNU and the Forward Guyana movement to work with the Win Party. And we have heard that there have been many attempts to get the 2 parties or the 2 sides to work together, but nothing has come of it. Now, the logic of the results of the elections suggests that it should be easy for the Win Party and the APNU to work together, because it is the APNU supporters who, in a sense, split their votes between Win and the APNU. But again, contradictions. It has not borne fruit. In fact, it has led to a strengthening of the PPP, in the sense that the PPP is now controlled in Region 4. Region 10 is in limbo, and the PPP has the final say, it seems, in what happens in Region 10. Reflect on where the logic of the election results has taken us as far as Win and the APNU are concerned.
Okay, I'm going to be very candid in my response. I think that the APMU, in my judgment, and I went out of my way to look at a lot of the social media clips that involve exchanges or opinions being shared by WIN and APMU people, particularly over, the controversy over the negotiations in the regions. And I notice you can't avoid noticing the bitterness, particularly among WIN supporters against the APMU. And there seems to have been suggestion that the APMU wanted to control WIN. And they used a lot of explicits on all kinds of things. I make this to say that I think that the APMU dealt with WIN badly. They should not have attempted to engage WIN in any action as it relates to the region without WIM first and foremost publicly announcing their position on these matters. I think the APMU was a victim of conventional politics and forgetting that WIM is not a conventional political party in the full sense. They don't have the long experience and so forth. And well-intended initiative could be easily be misplaced and interpreted by a victorious party who have, replaced the other side and who has a right to bragging rights. It is easy for that party to feel that you're trying to restrict the exercise of the newly won power. And I think that if I was advising the APMU, I would say, no, it is too early to have any discussions with the WIN party on those matters. And I would have argued that parties should state publicly, not privately, how they intend to deal with these matters, because politics at the end of the day is more public business than private business. So I felt that listening to everything, I think the APMU handled it badly. And I'm not getting the impression that WIM will recover very quickly and it will embrace opposition politics until WIM get to exercise, get to experience its limitations in the national parliament as leader of the opposition. I think WIN has to go through the political phase to see what this new power actually means in real terms. And out of that appreciation, I think WIN will be better placed to engage in a responsible and a meaningful collaboration with political forces. I think they're still in that zone, and understandably, okay, that they have done almost a political miracle, and they're still, is trying to understand that miracle. And I think they should be given space to understand it. When I talk about opposition should try to take advantage of the European Union's report, I felt that each opposition party must recognize the value of the report, and they must be able to highlight and to support and to give publicity in politics state and in their individual right. And in so doing, if all of them do the same thing, then it represents opposition unity on it. I am not looking at this stage for any workable collaboration between the opposition parties. I think it is too early for WIM. It is also too early for the young breakaway elements who destroy the APMU and do damage to the African community. I think they themselves haven't yet understand the full political consequences of the political action. And to coalesce the people in that state, I think it's premature politics, and it will not necessarily bring the results that we're looking for. The PNC, the APMU is hoping that the negotiations with WIM would lead to putting pressure on the PPP and to strengthen the WIN and the APMU, and it had the opposite effect. It's better they didn't do it. And they come out of it looking bad and being coursed by WIM up and down the country. So you rush with a haste, and reality demonstrates to you it was counterproductive. And that is my hard assessment. I'm for opposition unity going down the road. But this unity has to be reflected in the parliamentary engagement in a big way and in the public pronouncement of parties individually. And from those pronouncements, we try to come and to collect, okay, among some set of ideas. And that is the way I see it. So yes, opposition unity, but I don't expect much very quickly.
Quite an interesting perspective here by Tacuma Ogunseye of the Working People's Alliance. I hope that we are all paying attention because it's a new gaze on this issue. And I have said on this program that we are facing not necessarily a new situation, but it's the magnitude that makes it new. We've always had parties come up and do well. We, the WPA in the 1970s, we were even surprised in 1979, as Brother Ogunseye would imagine. We weren't even thinking about becoming a political party when Walter Rodney and Dr. Rupnarayan and Dr. Moali, Karen D'Souza, and others were arrested. And within a matter of days, when the outpouring of the people to the WPA, we were forced to become a political party when we weren't thinking about that. What is new about WIN is not that a third party came on the scene and did well. What is new is that they've done so well as far as parliamentary seats are concerned. If in those days there were free and fair elections, the WPA might have done as well as WIN did. We will never know that because we didn't contest an election until 1985, and elections in those days were as crooked as they are today. So Brother Tacuma's position that perhaps trying to rush this thing is not the right way. All right? It's not the right way. We have to let this thing play itself out. Is it sustainable? We don't know. What is going on in the minds of the Africans who voted for WIN? We don't know. What is going on in the minds of the Amerindians who voted for WIN? Will those young people who 18, 19, 20, who voted this year for WIN, next 5 years they'll be 25 years old? We don't know where they will be. Some of them might be in Barbados and Antigua and New York. and not, we don't know. And I think there is a way, and Ogunseye's argument bear this out, that we in Guyana sometimes look for quick fixes to our politics, and we do it with race. We almost want race to go away, when race is the thing that shapes us, but determine whether you get a crash dance or not, determine whether what your wage is. The public servants are predominantly black. And you're African, you're black. And it's your race that determines whether your wage. The East Indians are predominantly the sugar workers. They get treated differently when it comes to wages. So race determines wages. Race determines a lot of things. Yet we want it to go away. And it never goes away. And it gets worse and worse as we go along. Brother Tacuma, another controversial thing. There is the big issue about the government not leading the way in calling and making it possible for the election of an opposition leader. And it brings the politics down to an argument over morality, which says, as it in won enough votes to become opposition leader and should become opposition leader. And the government is saying he's a fugitive. And as a fugitive, he should not be in parliament. I think it's quite a position to be in. And again, I think in some quarters they're looking for quick fixes rather than to recognize that the logic has taken us to this impasse And we ought to really try to work it through rather than rush it through. But anyhow, what are your thoughts?
I want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding in the public out there. We in the WPA take the position that win with the 16 seats is the leading force in the parliamentary opposition, and all the progs and the functions that goes with that should go to that party and its leader. We are very clear on that. Personally, I also share that position. So anything I say, I want it to be borne in mind that very fundamental position. We have no interest in denying women and Mr. Mohammed of anything that he is entitled to coming out of the elections. Now, the PPP's position is a very complex position. And I start this way by saying that the ratification in Parliament of an opposition leader is a straightforward and simple matter in any democracy. And Guyana government like to show that we are a democracy and that we have fair and free elections. And therefore, the PPP's present attitude of denying win or Mr. Mohammed properly to sit in the National Assembly as leader of the opposition is something that politically the PPP must recognize as a political party, that they are expending political capital in a situation that normally it would be very foolish to extend political capital in that way, because at the end of the day, you more likely will have to allow the man to sit as leader of the opposition. But I think objective politics is that the PPP see itself not in a normal political situation. And I think they're very clear. And I think they have a very clear understanding of what is the Americans' attitude towards Mohammed. And I think that they have been part and parcel in probably developing that attitude. And I think that it comes to a point where the PPP, having stuck itself out so far on a limb behind the Americans, feel that they should not make the mistake of doing anything as it relates to Mohammed that may offend the Americans or may raise questions in the American circle as to the commitment of the PPP government to this project. And the PPP's dependency on the Americans in the border controversy and so forth and so forth. I think all of those things are tied up in the PPP's attitude to Mohammed. So it's more, in my judgment, it is not so much an attitude to Mohammed, it's an attitude to the Americans. That the PPP, from where they stand, I think they believe from their interest, it is better politics for them to be seen as putting pressure on Mohammed and denying Mohammed the leader of the opposition to the extent that they could do it legally. They feel it is in their best interest in cementing their relationship with the Americans. And I'm convinced it's not so much about Mohammed. I don't think that PPP, my judgment here, whether Mohammed is the leader of the opposition or not, because I think they're convinced that he can't work no magic. The APMU, which was in the opposition for umpteen years, and given the way PP control parliament, and given the way governance in this country, no political party in the opposition, if a party had 20 something seats and they couldn't do nothing much, you 16, you can do nothing much. So I don't think that the PPP is concerned about Mohammed. It's so much about the domestic politics at this point in time. I think it is tied to their reading of what the Americans want, and they're being super careful of not doing anything that could raise questions in the American circles. And given, I guess, the unpredictable nature of Trump, that the PPP is playing it safe.
Quite another interesting perspective here, because you listen to a lot of Win supporters and even opposition supporters who are not Win supporters, who are saying, you know, the PPP frightened Mohammed. And I hear that too. And, you know, sometimes you don't argue with those things because people come at it from the anti-PPP position, which is so strong. And if I were the PPP, I would be concerned at the level of disgust of them as a party by members of the opposition, supporters of the opposition, in particular African Guyanese. And I agree with you. I don't think the PPP is afraid politically of Win, because Win cannot do anything to change the equation. And I think it's one of the contradictions, because the people who shifted to Win were told that they were voting for change. And people wanted change. And many people thought that the APNU couldn't bring about that change because, first of all, they couldn't come together. They quarreled among themselves. And so they felt that that voting for Mohammed was going to bring about change. And the realness of what happened is that it has not brought about change as far as a change of government. It may have brought about change in the sense that a lot of young people who would not have normally engaged electoral politics did engage electoral politics. And I think that's one of the positives to have come out. But in terms of shifting the balance of power in the politics, and that, in fact, the PPP has been strengthened institutionally. They got more seats in parliament. They're now controlling Region 4. So in that sense, institutionally, no change has come. It has, as I said, energized some young African people, and we have to recognize that. And I think some people who are looking at the larger politics are trying to point that out to us, and they have to be given credit that where young people came into the political situation when they don't normally come into the political situation, and in a sense caused a rearrangement within the opposition. I think it has to be given some credit. Am I going too far with that analysis, Brother Ogun?
No, I think that you have to give the credit, and I do give the credit, but I also do it, I believe in contradictions, and I believe in dialectics. It is also, but if at the end of the day, it strengthens the PPP to end.
Yes.
You see, because, if at the end of the day, it makes you lose the war.
Yeah. And it's almost because here are people who voted against the APNU. And I'm now saying to the APNU, man, you got unite with Win. Right? You fought against me. And now you're directing me. I think we have not gotten our teeth into the contradiction.
Yes. It's too early.
It's too early. It's too early. A lot is going on, and I think Brother Ogunseye, thank you very much, my brother, for coming through and lending us your mind. I'm learning that from the young people. Got some during the election, some young activists. I don't know where I ran into them. One of them was saying that he likes to listen to me and my program and thing. And a couple of his friends said, Dr. Hines, let him tell you the truth. And I said, what is the truth? He said he want to borrow my mind. and I want to say the same thing to you here tonight. We would like to borrow your mind more often in trying not to give answers to questions, but to walk them through and tease them out for us, because a lot of times that is much more valuable than trying to come to conclusions. I once submitted an academic paper to a journal. They did their thing and they wrote back and said, good paper, Professor Hines, but your introduction is your conclusion, and your conclusion is your introduction. Quite apart from being embarrassed, but it taught me that lesson that you sometimes we are too anxious to conclude things. So I put my conclusion as my introduction. It was a lesson that I learned to this day, and I think this situation is evolving, and we have to try to understand it. And I am glad that you are helping us to do that. Thank you very much, my brother.
Okay, and thank you and your viewers for giving me the opportunity to share my views with the audience.
Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, I hope tonight we have at least taking you in another direction in trying to understand what is unfolding. I know the supporters of the APNU are still miffed at what happened. Some people are still angry at what happened. And people often ask me, Dr. Hines, are you not miffed and angry? And I am miffed. I am angry. I'm a human being. But I quickly move from being miffed and from being angry to being hopeful, because guided by history, guided by a history of political behavior of Guyanese over time, I'm saying that this situation, I hear people who say, the PNC is dead, or the PNC has to go back and rebuild the party and all these things. We are trying quickly, and I think I have said that the PNC doesn't have to rebuild no party. If I were to give advice to the PNC, I'll say, go back, regroup, try to understand your own supporters, try to understand what they're telling you, try to understand the meaning of their political language. They're saying many things at the same time. And as leaders, we have to figure out of those many things that they're saying, what is the sweet spot they're trying to get us to? What is the one thing out of the 10 things they're telling us why they didn't vote for us? What is the sweet spot? And we haven't figured that out yet, because we are trying to get ahead of I don't think the people themselves know exactly what they are saying in one fell swoop. They use their vote to express multiple emotions. And there are multiple emotions. There was not a monolith that went away from the APNU. In fact, more people stayed home than voted for win. And we often in our analysis forget that. In Trinidad and Tobago, 101,000 PNM supporters stayed away. They didn't have a win there. In Guyana, over 70-something thousand of APNU supporters stayed away. And we are trying to figure out why the Win people voted Win. And not trying to figure out why the 70-something said no Win, no PPP, no APNU are staying away. And we are going to continue on this program to try to work this thing through. Because if we give the wrong diagnosis, we're going to kill the patient. And that's what the PPP, what people want us to do, to kill the APNU, to kill the PNC. And maybe we are inadvertently contributing to that by not trying to exercise our political mind a little bit more and try to understand what's here. My view is the one thing we are trying to avoid. I listen to people make all the analysis about why our people went from us. And the one thing they are ignoring is the ethnic and racial emotions that came out in those elections. Race and ethnicity sometimes do not reflect themselves in clear terms because people don't like to say, you know, I'm being driven by my ethnic and racial concern. They don't like to say it. They don't like to say it. And we sometimes look for people to say it explicitly. Part of what I think they're telling us when they say when APNU was in office, they didn't do anything for we. They're not saying when APNU was in office, they didn't do anything for PNC members and PNC supporters. They know that PNC members and supporters benefited when APNU was in office. What they're saying is that we didn't do nothing for black people. No, they tell me that. They tell Ogunseye that. Because they know that we are what Rastaman called black heart. But they're not likely to tell Norton that. Because they don't think that Norton's politics is a kind of black power politics. They won't tell a lot of PNC leaders that. Right? What they mean by Granger turning back on we, the we, it's not PNC supporters and WPA supporters. He turned back on black people. And I think insofar as we are suppressing our ability to understand the subtext, you know, there's the text and the subtext, right? The text is APNU and do nothing for we. The subtext is we give you all power. You all and do nothing for black people. Now, I'm not saying that's the truth. Because in many regards, well, in some regards, black people benefited from APNU policies. But they're telling us something deeper. We started out with Chalk Dust telling us the message of the 70s. The message of the 70s. I think we often forget the message of the 70s. We got independence and we questioned the independence. Why after independence, black people couldn't work in banks? Why after independence, black people still couldn't go to certain schools? And what the Black Power Revolution did was to force governments, the Burnham government, the Eric Williams government, to start making black people work in banks. And to start making black people could go to QC and bishops and other places. We forced the politicians, all right? And the politicians, the Eric Williams and Burnhams, I think understood the subtext. I am not sure that our present political leaders sufficiently understand the subtext. And if they understand the subtext, whether they have the courage to address the subtext. Don't underrate the PPP. They have a way of beating you into feeling guilty about your own identity. They've mastered that art. As someone who's a victim of it, I wonder. But you have to set the PPP has mastered that art Jack, do you know what is the definition of a racist? But every time an African leader opens his mouth, he said it's racist. And over time, Indians come to believe that. Well, a critical mass of them. I don't think all of them. You look at the comments on social media. The comments, mostly from the Indian side, are an attack on the race of opposition leaders. They're monkeys, they're this, they're that, they're racist. We on the APNU side, we on the opposition side, we attack the leaders. Jack Dio is a bad man. Ali is a bad man. We don't attack Indian people. And that is a good thing. But I'm just showing you the attitude of the two political cultures. We tend to go after the individual leaders. Insofar as our comrades on the other side go after individual leaders, is to use it to demonize all black people. So Burnham is demonized, not as an individual who's bad, but as a black man who take away flower from Indian people, who do this, who do that. Understand how political culture works. And so therefore, the leaders on the opposition side are reticent to read into what happened on September 3rd, the racial message. I think we are doing a little bit better, but we still have not worked out that. I'm not saying the entire message is about race, but a large part of the message that those young people sent to us is that you all are not looking after us as black people, and we're going to freelance. We're going to look after we, as in I and I, because you all had power and you all didn't look after we as the collective. So we're going I and I. And insofar as Muhammad is a self-made I and I, he rich, got his swag, he's a gangster, you know, he take on the PPP, bite their hand, even though they're feedy. Understand, you all understand. You all understand, when we remove from our analysis that key ingredient, we are missing. As I've said, what those African youth in particular did is look at Muhammad and say, you represent what we think the modern African leader needs to represent. The modern African leader needs to be bold-faced. The modern African leader needs to want to fight. The modern African leader needs to take on the PPP head on. And that's the message, part of the message I think they're sending to us. But we are reading it all, you know. African leader, African people voted for an Indian leader. They voted for an Indian leader to send a message to black leaders. And son, I think, again, we're not understanding the thing. We're not understanding the thing. The thing is not straightforward. That's what Ogunseye has taught us tonight. This thing is not straightforward. And we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of adjustments to make. And we have to not believe that unconventional behavior on the part of some of our people will be corrected by conventional behavior. Because in many regards, they're saying that conventional behavior has not yielded much for African people and poor people. And by going to an unconventional man, what they think is an unconventional man, right? It's going to shake things up. So when people are telling us we have to do this and we have to do that and we have to do the terror, we have to do more conventional things. When people vote against us our convention, our conventional action, we are getting it wrong. I am not condemning conventional politics. There's a place for conventional politics, always. But conventional politics has to be steeped in an understanding of sometimes when our people become unconventional. Good night. Thank you all for the birthday celebrations, the birthday, not celebrations, the birthday wishes and the gifts of love. I truly appreciate it. We come back tomorrow. We come back tomorrow. Good night. Goodbye. Until tomorrow.